Hey guys, in this video, we are going to learn how to graph quadratics from vertex form. So if you remember in the last video, we talked about how you can get the vertex from the h that goes here and the k that goes here. So the h, the opposite of that number is always the x value of your vertex, and the k is your y value of the vertex. So when you're doing these types of problems, you always want to find the vertex first and then plot it. Now there is a pattern to plotting points after that that you will need to learn, and we'll talk about it here throughout this video, but it's going to be a pattern that you're going to have to memorize for yourself, or at least understand why it works the way it does. Once you have at least 5 points, you may connect the points with a curve to form a parabola. Now we know that sometimes it can be difficult to make those U's look perfect, so don't worry about it. As long as they don't look like V's, we are happy with that. Okay, so let's start with this first equation here. It's y equals x plus 4 squared minus 1. Now remember, when you're finding the vertex, the x value of your vertex is the opposite of the number in the parentheses. So the opposite of 4 is negative 4. And the y value is the same as the number at the end, which is negative 1. So my vertex is negative 4, negative 1. So now I'm going to plot that point. So here's negative 4, negative 1. That's right there. Okay. Now I need to decide, is this going to be a max or a min? Well, if you remember, if it was positive out in front, if a was positive, it meant that it opened up. And if a is negative, it means it opens down. Well, there's no sign here at all, which means it's positive, which means it's going to open up, which means we are going to have a minimum. Okay? So when you're doing this, the pattern that you need to do is over 1, up 1, over 2, up 4, etc. And the reason why it works like that is because we are dealing with quadratics. Quadratics have a square in them. So if you think about it, start at the vertex. If I go over 1, I need to go up the squared amount. 1 squared is 1. So over 1, up 1. And you must do that on both sides of the vertex. Then return to the vertex. If I go over 2, I need to go up the squared amount. 2 squared is 4. So up 1, 2, 3, 4. Same thing on the other side. Over 2, up 1, 2, 3, 4. And that pattern works for every single one of these. Sometimes the pattern will change a little bit depending on if there's a number out in front or not. But if there's no number in front, you always use this same pattern. Now, you must have at least 5 points. The only time you need to have more than 5 points is if you have not reached the x-axis yet. So anytime I'm doing these problems with you guys, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. I'm going to say, 1, do you have 5 points? And then I'm going to ask, have you touched the x-axis? If the answer to both of those questions is yes, then you can go ahead and draw your parabola. Again, just make sure they're not V-shaped. Make sure it's a curve there. The last question we need to answer is, what are the roots? Well, remember, roots are the same thing as the x-intercepts. So that's the place where the graph touches the x-axis. There are 2 of them in this case. One of them is at negative 5. The other is at negative 3. So negative 5 and negative 3 are my roots, or solutions. Okay, let's try the next one. We have y equals negative 2 times x minus 1 squared plus 4. Okay, so let's find the vertex first. Remember, the x value of your vertex is the opposite of the number in the parentheses. The opposite of negative 1 is positive 1. And the y value of your vertex is the number at the end, which is 4. So I'm going to plot that first. 1, 4 is right here. All right, then we need to decide if it's a max or a min and which way the graph will open. Well, there's a negative sign out in front here, which tells me that it's going to open down, which means there is a maximum, which means instead of going up from the vertex, we're going to go down when plotting points. Now, there is this negative 2 out in front here. The negative tells us that we open down. The 2 tells us that the pattern is going to change. So we follow the normal pattern, but we're going to multiply the vertical distance by 2. So here's what that means. Again, start at the vertex. If I go over 1, normally I would need to go down the squared amount. 1 squared is 1. But when there's a number out in front, you must multiply that down distance by the number in front, which in this case is 2. So now when I go over 1, normally I'd go down 1, but now I need to multiply that by 2. 1 times 2 is 2. So I'm going to go down 2. Over 1, down 2. Now if I go over back to the vertex and over 2, normally I would go down 2 squared, which is 4. But 4 times 2 is 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you have to do that on both sides. 1, 2 to the left, and then down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, I have my 5 points, and I have crossed the x-axis. So I'm going to go ahead and make my graph. There's my curve. All right, now we're supposed to say what the roots are. However, if you look, these are not perfectly crossing at a good spot on the x-axis. So you can't tell without estimating. So whenever that happens, which is not often, in fact, most of the time it doesn't happen, but in the event that it does, we will let you know that you will have problems on the paper that will do this. You are going to write CNT, which means cannot tell from the graph. Again, I can't stress this enough, guys. This doesn't happen very often. So most of the time when you're doing problems and you see that they don't cross at a great spot, it probably means you did something wrong and you should go back and check. But every once in a while this happens, which is why we wanted to make sure that you understand what to do in the event that it does. And that's it. That is how you graph quadratics from Vertex form.